The massive alien ship appeared over Earth without warning. It was bigger than any human city, its dark metal surface covered in strange lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. The ship cast a shadow over half of North America as it hung in the sky, silent and threatening. President Martinez stood in the White House Situation Room, staring at the screens that showed the alien vessel. Around the world, other leaders watched the same terrifying sight from their own command centers. The ship had been there for 6 hours, and no one knew what to do. Then the alien spoke. The voice came through every radio, every television, every phone on Earth at the same time. It was cold and mechanical, translated into every human language perfectly. Humans of Earth. I am Ambassador Veltar of the Galactic Confederation. Your species has been observed and judged. You will now receive the terms of your submission. President Martinez felt his blood turn cold. Submission? The word made his stomach twist. You have 72 of your standard hours to comply with these demands. The voice continued. First, you will surrender control of your planet to Confederation oversight. Second, you will provide 90% of your world's resources as tribute to the Confederation. Third, 80% of your population will be relocated to designated work worlds throughout our territory. Fourth, the remaining humans will accept permanent status as a servant species. The room fell silent. Martinez looked around at his advisors, seeing the same shock on every face. The Secretary of Defense, General Thompson, was the first to speak. They can't be serious, Thompson whispered. But the alien voice wasn't finished. These terms are not negotiable. They are the same terms offered to all primitive species discovered by the Confederation. In our 12,000 years of expansion, no species has ever refused these generous conditions. You have 72 hours to signal your acceptance. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your species. The transmission ended, leaving only silence. For a moment, no one in the Situation Room moved. Then President Martinez turned to his communications officer. Get me every world leader on the emergency network now. The next few hours were chaos. Emergency sessions were called in every capital on Earth. The United Nations building in New York filled with representatives from every nation. Video calls connected leaders across time zones as they tried to process what had just happened. Some wanted to surrender immediately. The president of the European Federation argued that resistance was impossible. Look at that ship, she said during the video conference. It's the size of a city. What can we possibly do against that? Others wanted to negotiate. The Chinese premier suggested trying to bargain for better terms. Maybe we can offer them 50% instead of 90%, he said hopefully. But as the hours passed, a different feeling began to grow among the world's leaders. It started small, just a few voices speaking up during the emergency sessions. But it spread quickly. The Indian Prime Minister was one of the first to say it out loud. We cannot give up our children to be slaves. The African Union representative agreed. My people have known slavery. We will not accept it again. The Australian Prime Minister put it simply, if we're going to die anyway, let's die fighting. Meanwhile, up in the alien ship, Ambassador Veltar watched the human communications with growing confusion. In his long career, he had delivered the same ultimatum to over 50 different species. Some begged, some tried to negotiate, some surrendered immediately. But none had ever reacted like the humans. Instead of panic, the humans seemed to be getting angry. Veltar studied the intercepted communications. The humans were mobilizing their military forces. Their space stations were going to high alert. Their few warships were taking defensive positions around their planet. It was almost amusing. The humans had maybe 200 spacecraft, most of them converted cargo ships. The Confederation had over 3,000 warships in just the advance fleet. The humans' weapons were primitive projectile launchers and simple missiles. Confederation ships had plasma cannons that could melt mountains. But still, something about the human response bothered Veltar. In all his years of conquest, no species had ever prepared to fight after receiving the ultimatum. They all understood that resistance was hopeless. These humans seemed to think they had a chance. With 24 hours left on the deadline, Veltar received the formal response from Earth. It came through official diplomatic channels, signed by every major world leader, transmitted in perfect Confederation standard language. The message was short. The United Earth Government hereby rejects the Confederation ultimatum in its entirety. We will not submit. We will not surrender our people. We will not accept slavery. Our answer is no. Veltar read the message 3 times, certain there had been a translation error. No species said no to the Confederation. It was impossible. He sent a clarification request explaining that the ultimatum was not a negotiation but a final demand. Surely the humans had misunderstood. The response came back within an hour. We understand your demands perfectly. Our answer remains no. For the first time in his long career, Beltar felt something like uncertainty. He consulted with his tactical advisors, all members of species that had submitted to the Confederation centuries ago. Perhaps they do not understand the consequences, suggested his Zephyrian aide. Their species is very young. They may not comprehend the power of the Confederation. Or they may be calling our bluff, said the Corvan tactical officer. Some species try this initially. They usually change their minds when they see our fleet. Veltar decided to give the humans one final demonstration. He ordered a squadron of fighters to perform a show of force, flying low over Earth's major cities. The sleek Confederation fighters moved faster than anything humans had ever built, their energy weapons lighting up the sky as they fired harmless warning shots into empty ocean. Surely this would convince the humans to reconsider. The human response came an hour later. Nice light show. Our answer is still no. With 12 hours remaining, Veltar made his final attempt at diplomacy. He opened a direct communication channel to Earth's leaders. Humans, he said, his voice broadcasted to their emergency command centers. You do not understand what you are refusing. The Confederation spans 3 spiral arms of your galaxy. We command the loyalty of 47 species. Our fleets number in the hundreds of thousands. Your entire civilization could be destroyed by a single, one of our battle groups. President Martinez answered for all of humanity. We understand exactly what we're refusing. We're refusing to be slaves. We're refusing to let our children be taken from us. We're refusing to kneel to bullies who think size makes them right. But you will die, Veltar said, genuinely puzzled by human logic. Maybe, Martinez replied. But we'll die free. And maybe we won't die at all. You might be surprised what humans can do when you back us into a corner. Veltar ended the communication feeling deeply unsettled. In 12,000 years, no species had ever spoken to the Confederation with such defiance. These humans were either the bravest species he had ever encountered, or the most foolish. With 6 hours remaining, he sent his final message to Earth. You have 6 hours to reconsider. This is your last chance to save your species. The human response was immediate. We don't need 6 hours. We don't need 6 minutes. Our answer was no yesterday, it's no today, and it will be no tomorrow. Come and try to take what you want. We'll be waiting. As the deadline approached, Veltar gave the order he had given many times before, but never with such reluctance. The advance fleet would jump to the human system and demonstrate the price of defying the Confederation. But for the first time in his career, Ambassador Veltar wondered if the humans knew something he didn't. Ambassador Veltar could not understand what he was seeing. The humans had received their final warning 6 hours ago, and instead of preparing to surrender, they were doing something completely unexpected. They were getting ready to fight. From his command ship orbiting Earth, Veltar watched through advanced sensors as human activity exploded across their solar system. Every shipyard around Earth, Mars, and the asteroid belt had gone into emergency production mode. Factories that normally made civilian equipment were now producing something else entirely. What are they building? Veltar asked his intelligence officer. A thin Zarathi named Kes studied the sensor readings with multiple eyes. It's difficult to determine, Ambassador. They appear to be manufacturing components for spacecraft, but the designs don't match anything in our databases. The energy signatures are unusual. On the main screen, Veltar watched as human cargo ships moved in streams between the planets. But they weren't fleeing as expected. Instead, they were carrying massive containers toward the outer edges of their solar system. The containers were being positioned at what seemed like random points in space, far from any planets or stations. Are they trying to hide their most valuable resources? Veltar wondered aloud. That's what we initially thought, Kes replied. But our deep scans show the containers are mostly empty. It makes no logical sense. Down on Earth, the human response continued to baffle the Confederation observers. Instead of mass panic, human cities were organizing with military efficiency. Instead of riots, there were orderly evacuations of non-essential personnel from major population centers. Instead of surrender negotiations, Human leaders were giving speeches about resistance and freedom. President Martinez appeared on every human communication network, speaking directly to his species. My fellow humans, we face the greatest threat in our history, but we are not helpless. For the past century since we first detected signals from hostile alien civilizations, we have been preparing for this day. Veltar leaned forward in his command chair. What was the human leader talking about? The Confederation's first contact with humanity had been 3 days ago. Martinez continued his speech. Our scientists, our engineers, our military leaders have spent generations developing the tools we need to defend ourselves. Today, we put those preparations to the test. In the asteroid belt, something was happening that made Veltar's tactical staff increasingly nervous. Human mining operations, which had seemed routine for decades, were suddenly revealing new capabilities. Mining platforms were unfolding like metal flowers, exposing weapon systems that hadn't shown up on any previous scans. How did we miss those? Demanded Veltar. They weren't there before, insisted his sensor technician. Or if they were hidden so well that our equipment couldn't detect them. The most disturbing development was happening on Earth's moon. What the Confederation had cataloged as research stations and communication arrays were transforming before their eyes. Sections of the lunar surface were sliding open, revealing massive installations that had been hidden underground. Sir, called the communications officer, we're detecting high-energy transmissions from the human moon base. They're sending coded messages throughout their solar system. Can you decode them? Negative. The encryption is unlike anything we've seen. It appears to use quantum-level security that changes faster than our computers can process. Veltar felt a growing unease. He had conquered 47 worlds for the Confederation, and he had never seen anything like this. Most species, when faced with the Confederation ultimatum, either surrendered immediately or fell into chaos. They didn't reorganize with military precision and reveal hidden defenses. As the final hours of the deadline approached, the human activity reached a fever pitch. Their few known warships, which the Confederation had dismissed as converted cargo, haulers were taking positions throughout the solar system, but they weren't clustering defensively around their homeworld as expected. Instead, they were spreading out, positioning themselves at seemingly random locations. Their deployment makes no tactical sense, reported the Corvan tactical officer. They're dividing their already inferior forces. Any competent commander would concentrate their ships for a last stand around their home planet. But Veltar was beginning to suspect that human military thinking might not follow conventional patterns. On the human homeworld, something else was happening that troubled the Confederation observers. Instead of the expected despair and surrender, humans were displaying unprecedented unity. Old enemies were setting aside their differences. Nations that had been rivals for centuries were working together seamlessly. The human military was mobilizing not just soldiers, but entire populations. Children were being moved to deep underground facilities, but adults were volunteering for combat roles in numbers that seemed impossible. According to Confederation intelligence, Earth's total military personnel numbered about 50 million. But the humans were now registering over 2 billion combat volunteers. How can they arm 2 billion fighters? Asked Kess. They can't, Veltar replied confidently. They don't have the weapons or equipment to arm even a fraction of that number. But even as he said it, Veltar watched human factories producing equipment at rates that seemed to violate their known industrial capacity. Somehow they were manufacturing weapons, armor, and spacecraft faster than should have been possible for their technology level. With 12 hours remaining, Veltar received reports that made him question everything the Confederation thought it knew about humans. Deep space sensors were detecting energy signatures from the outer reaches of the human solar system. The mysterious containers that humans had been positioning were beginning to power up. What are those things? Veltar demanded. Unknown, replied his science officer. They're generating energy patterns we've never seen before. It's almost as if they're... Yes? As if they're creating artificial gravitational fields. Veltar knew that was impossible. Artificial gravity manipulation required technology that took most species thousands of years to develop. The humans had barely achieved interplanetary flight. As the final 6 hours approached, the humans sent one more message that confused Veltar more than all the rest combined. It came from Admiral Chen, the commander of Earth's so-called defense fleet. Confederation forces, she said in a calm, steady voice. You have 6 hours to withdraw from our solar system. This is your only warning. Leave now or face the consequences of your aggression. The message was so absurd that several of Veltar's junior officers actually laughed. A species with 200 primitive spacecraft was threatening the advance fleet of the Galactic Confederation, but Admiral Chen wasn't finished. "You assume we are weak because we are young," she continued. "You assume we are defenseless because you cannot see our defenses. You assume we will surrender because that's what other species have done. You are wrong on all counts." The transmission included detailed tactical data about Confederation ship designs, weapon capabilities, and fleet movements that the humans should not have possessed. Somehow they had been gathering intelligence on the Confederation for years without being detected. "How do they know our ship specifications?" whispered Kess. Veltar had no answer. In the final hour before the deadline, something happened that would haunt Veltar for the rest of his life. The humans sent a final message, broadcast on all frequencies to ensure the Confederation couldn't miss it. It was a simple image, a human child, no more than 10 years old, standing in front of a human flag. The child looked directly into the camera and spoke in the Confederation standard language. "My name is Sarah Chen. I am 10 years old. I want to tell you something about humans. We don't give up, we don't surrender, and we protect our families. You want to make us slaves. You want to take away our freedom. But we would rather die fighting than live on our knees." The child paused, then smiled with pure human determination. "My grandmother is Admiral Chen. She's going to show you what happens when you threaten human children." When the deadline expired, Veltar gave the order he had given many times before. "Jump to the target system. Begin the demonstration." But, for the first time in 12,000 years of Confederation expansion, Ambassador Veltar wondered if they were making a terrible mistake. The Confederation advance fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 3,000 warships appeared across the human solar system, like a swarm of metal locusts. The sight had brought dozens of civilizations to their knees without a single shot being fired. Ambassador Veltar stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the inevitable Victory, watching the tactical displays show his overwhelming force deployment. Massive dreadnoughts took position near each human world. Battlecruisers formed attack squadrons around human space stations. Fighter wings spread out to cover every possible escape route. "All ships report ready, Ambassador," announced his fleet commander, Admiral Thexvar. "We await your orders to begin the demonstration." Veltar nodded grimly. The demonstration was always the same. They would destroy a minor human installation to show their power, then give the species one final chance to surrender before the real attack began. "Target the human colony on their red planet," Veltar ordered. "Destroy their industrial complex as a warning." But before the order could be carried out, a human voice filled the bridge. It was Admiral Chen, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Confederation fleet, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. You are trespassing in human space without permission. You have one chance to withdraw peacefully. Leave now, or we will consider your presence an act of war." Several of Veltar's officers actually laughed. The humans had maybe 200 small ships scattered throughout their system. The Confederation fleet could destroy them all without taking a single casualty. "Admiral Chen," Veltar responded, "you are greatly outnumbered. Surrender now and your species may yet survive as servants of the Confederation." "We don't serve anyone," came the immediate reply. "And you're about to learn why humans don't back down from bullies." Veltar shook his head. These humans would learn the hard way. "Fire on the Mars colony," he ordered. 12 Confederation dreadnoughts turned their main plasma cannons toward the human settlement on Mars. The weapons, charged with building energy, that could be seen across space as blue-white light gathering at the tips of their massive gun barrels. The plasma beams lanced out, carrying enough destructive power to level a city. They should have struck the Mars colony and reduced it to molten metal and ash. Instead, something impossible happened. The beams hit what looked like empty space and simply stopped. They splashed against an invisible barrier, their energy dispersing. In brilliant flashes of light, the Mars colony remained completely untouched. "What just happened?" demanded Veltar. "Unknown energy interference," reported his science officer. "Something deflected our plasma beams, but sensors show nothing in the target area." "Fire again." This time, 24 dreadnoughts fired simultaneously. The combined plasma barrage should have been enough to crack a moon. But again the beams struck the invisible barrier and dispersed harmlessly. "Impossible," whispered Admiral Thexvar. "No known technology can stop that much concentrated plasma fire." That's when Admiral Chen's voice returned, but now it carried a different tone. Where before there had been warnings, now there was cold fury. "You fired on civilians," she said. "That was a mistake. Now you get to see what happens when you threaten human families." Suddenly, the space around the Confederation fleet came alive with activity. Ships that had been drifting like space junk powered up, revealing themselves as heavily armed human vessels. The cargo containers that humans had positioned throughout the system began unfolding, transforming into weapon platforms that bristled with cannons and missile tubes. But most shocking of all, the humans began using weapons that shouldn't have existed. The first indication of how wrong everything had gone came when a human ship no larger than a Confederation fighter launched something at the dreadnought Final Judgment. The projectile was tiny compared to the massive alien warship, but it struck with impossible force. The kinetic round punched completely through the dreadnought shields, as if they weren't there. It penetrated the armored hull, passed through 17 decks and exited out the other side, leaving a perfectly round hole that vented atmosphere and crew into space. "How is that possible?" gasped Thexvar. That projectile was traveling at nearly light speed. More human ships revealed themselves, emerging from hiding spots among asteroids and behind planets. Each one opened fire with weapons that defied Confederation understanding of physics. Kinetic rounds that moved faster than anything had a right to move. Missiles that seemed to change direction without thrusters. Energy beams that cut through Confederation armor like it was paper. But it wasn't just the weapons that horrified Veltar. It was how the humans fought. Confederation warfare was civilized. Fleets faced each other in organized formations. Ships engaged at respectful distances. When casualties reached 15%, the losing side withdrew to negotiate terms. Humans fought like wild animals. They came at the Confederation ships from all directions at once. They used damaged vessels as weapons, ramming them into enemy ships while the crews evacuated at the last second. They deployed clouds of tiny drones that swarmed over Confederation vessels like metallic insects, cutting through hulls and disabling systems. Worst of all, they seemed to have no concept of acceptable losses. The human ship Chicago's Revenge lost its entire forward section to plasma cannon fire, but kept fighting with its rear guns until it was completely destroyed. The Beijing's Fury had its engines blown off and half its crew killed, but continued attacking even as it drifted helplessly through space. "They're not retreating," observed Kess with something like horror in his voice. "They're taking 90% casualties and still fighting." "It's not possible," Thexvar insisted. "No sane species fights to total extinction." But the humans weren't fighting to extinction. They were fighting to win. As the battle raged, Veltar began to notice something that made his blood run cold. The human ships weren't just fighting desperately. They were fighting intelligently. Every move they made seemed designed to maximize Confederation casualties while preserving human forces. The containers that had seemed randomly placed throughout the system revealed their purpose. They were mobile manufacturing plants, building new human ships even as the battle continued. Weapons platforms that had been disguised as asteroids opened fire from perfect ambush positions. Most terrifying of all, the humans were learning. Early in the battle, Confederation plasma cannons had some success against human shields, but as the fight continued, the human defensive systems adapted, becoming more resistant to Confederation weapons with each passing hour. "Sir," called the communications officer, "we're receiving reports from all battle groups. We've lost over 600 ships in the first 4 hours of combat." 600 ships, in 4 hours, against a supposedly primitive species with inferior technology. "Order all units to withdraw to Rally Point 7, Veltar commanded. "We need to regroup." But the humans weren't about to let them regroup peacefully. As the Confederation fleet tried to disengage, human forces pressed their attack with renewed fury. Ships that had been playing dead suddenly came back to life, striking at retreating Confederation vessels. The human admiral's voice filled the comm channels one more time. "You came here to destroy us. You fired on our civilians. You thought we would be easy prey." On the main screen, Veltar could see a human ship closing on his flagship. It was smaller than the inevitable Victory, but it moved with predatory grace, dodging plasma beams and missile attacks as it approached. "You are wrong," Admiral Chen continued. "We are not prey. We are not victims. We are humans, and when you threaten our families, we become something you should fear." The human ship fired a single missile at point-blank range. Veltar watched in horror as his flagship's shields failed completely, unable to stop what looked like a simple explosive device. The inevitable Victory shuddered under the impact. Emergency lights flashed as systems failed throughout the ship. "Damage report," Veltar shouted. "Hull breach on decks 12 through 18, came the panicked reply. Main engines offline, weapon systems failing. Whatever they hit us with, it's some kind of quantum disruptor. It's tearing our ship apart at the molecular level. As his flagship died around him, Veltar gave the order he had never imagined giving. All ships, emergency retreat. Jump to hyperspace immediately. Of the ICOR, 3,000 ships that had entered the human system, fewer than 800 limped away. The rest became expanding clouds of debris, monument to the first military defeat in Confederation history. As the surviving ships fled into hyperspace, Veltar sent a desperate message to Confederation High Command. The humans are not what we thought. Send everything, send the Grand Fleet. These creatures are not a primitive species, they are something else entirely. The emergency session of the Confederation High Council convened within hours of receiving Veltar's desperate transmission. In the Grand Chamber on Hegemony Prime, representatives from 47 species gathered to hear something that had never happened before. A report of military defeat. Supreme Chancellor Mordak, leader of the species that had founded the Confederation 12,000 years ago, listened to Veltar's account with growing disbelief. The holographic projection showed the battered ambassador standing in what remained of his command ship, his uniform torn, and his confidence shattered. You're telling us that humans destroyed over 2,000 ships from our advance fleet? Mordak's voice carried the weight of millennia of unquestioned authority. Yes, Supreme Chancellor, Veltar replied. Their technology is far more advanced than we believed. Their weapons ignore our shields. Their tactics are unlike anything we've encountered. Most importantly, they fight with a ferocity that borders on madness. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Some species demanded immediate retaliation. Others suggested negotiation. A few even whispered about withdrawal from human space entirely. Mordak silenced them all with a gesture. In 12,000 years, no species has successfully resisted the Confederation. These humans will not be the first. Prepare the Grand Fleet. The Grand Fleet was the Confederation's ultimate weapon. 50,000 ships ranging from massive super dreadnoughts to clouds of fighter craft. It was the force that had conquered the Silicon Queens of Vega. It was the armada that had brought the warrior cultures of the Andromeda Spiral to their knees. Within 72 hours, the largest military force in galactic history was assembled and ready for deployment to the human system. Admiral Zektar, Supreme Commander of Confederation military forces, stood on the bridge of the super dreadnought, Galaxy's End, as his fleet prepared for the final jump to human space. He was a member of the Hegemony species, one of the original founders of the Confederation, and he had never known defeat. All battle groups report ready, announced his fleet coordinator. 50,000 ships in perfect formation. Whatever these humans have, it won't be enough against the full might of the Confederation. Zektar nodded confidently. Veltar had been caught off guard by human trickery, but the Grand Fleet was prepared for anything. They had studied the battle recordings. They understood human tactics now. This would be the shortest conquest in Confederation history. Begin the jump, Zektar ordered. 50,000 ships entered hyperspace simultaneously, creating a distortion in spacetime that could be detected from neighboring star systems. They emerged in the human solar system expecting to find a species cowering in fear after their first taste of Confederation power. Instead, they found something impossible. The human system appeared completely empty. Where are they? Demanded Zektar, staring at tactical displays that showed no human ships, no space stations, no activity whatsoever. Sensors detect minimal life signs on the human homeworld, reported the science officer. All orbital installations appear to have been abandoned. There are no ships of any size anywhere in the system. It's a trap, warned the tactical officer. The humans showed they can hide their ships. They must be cloaked somehow. Zektar considered this possibility. But even if every human ship was hidden, their previous fleet had numbered only a few hundred vessels. Against 50,000 Confederation ships, even a surprise attack would be meaningless. Deploy the fleet in standard conquest formation, he ordered. Begin deep scans of every planet, moon, and asteroid. If the humans are hiding, we'll find them. But as the Grand Fleet spread throughout the system, their sensors detected something that made no sense. There was only one human ship visible anywhere in space. A single vessel drifted in the empty void between Earth and Mars, broadcasting a simple message on repeat. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. If you can hear this message, please respond. Zektar smiled coldly. Perhaps the humans had finally realized the futility of resistance. Open a channel to the human ship, he commanded. Admiral Chen's weathered face appeared on the main screen. She looked older than in the previous recordings, as if the recent battle had aged her years in a matter of days. "Admiral Chen, Zektar," said with mock courtesy. "I am Admiral Zektar of the Confederation Grand Fleet. I trust you're prepared to discuss surrender terms." Chen looked at him with an expression of pity that Zektar found unsettling. "Admiral Zektar," she replied quietly. "I'm sorry it had to come to this. We tried to warn you. We gave you chances to leave peacefully, but you wouldn't listen." "What are you talking about?" Zektar demanded. "You're one ship against 50,000. Surrender now and we might allow your species to survive as slaves." Chen shook her head sadly. "You still don't understand, do you? You think this is about ships and weapons and superior numbers. You think because you can see only one of our vessels, we must be defeated. Aren't you?" Zektar asked. "Admiral," Chen said with genuine sorrow in her voice, "you should have stayed home." Then her image disappeared from the screen. For a moment nothing happened. The Grand Fleet maintained its formation. 50,000 ships spread throughout the human system, ready to begin the final conquest. That's when space itself seemed to come alive. The first indication that something was wrong came from the outer edge of the system, where a battle group of 500 ships was conducting long-range reconnaissance. The group commander's frantic voice filled the comm channels. "This is Battle Group 7, we're under attack, the asteroids are firing at us, the asteroids are firing at us." Before anyone could respond, the communications went silent. Across the system, similar reports began flooding in. Weapons fire was coming from everywhere and nowhere. Asteroids that had been scanned and cleared were suddenly bristling with gun emplacements. Empty space was erupting with missile launches. Planets that showed no signs of military installations were firing massive energy beams at Confederation ships. "How is this possible?" screamed the tactical officer as his display showed weapon systems that couldn't exist. The answer became clear as human ships began revealing themselves throughout the system. But these weren't the few hundred vessels the Confederation had expected. Ship after ship decloaked, appearing from what had seemed like empty space. First hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands of human vessels materialized around the Grand Fleet. They had been there all along, hidden by technology that bent space and time itself to conceal their presence. "Impossible," whispered Zektar. "Our deep scans should have detected them." But what truly broke his confidence was the size of the human fleet. The Confederation intelligence had said humans possessed maybe 200 ships. Instead, over 20,000 human vessels surrounded the Grand Fleet, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything in the Confederation databases. The human ships didn't look like the primitive converted cargo haulers from the previous battle. These were purpose-built warships, sleek and deadly, bristling with weapons that shouldn't have been possible for such a young species to develop. "Admiral," called the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Admiral," Chen's voice filled the bridge once more, but now it was being broadcast simultaneously from thousands of human ships throughout the system. "Confederation forces," she said. "You are surrounded. You are outgunned. You are in a system that has been prepared for your arrival for over a century. This is your final warning. Surrender now, or face complete destruction." Zektar looked at his tactical displays in growing horror. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a weapon. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid had been armed with defensive systems that had somehow been invisible to Confederation sensors. But worse than the weapons were the implications. This level of preparation meant the humans had known about the Confederation for decades, possibly centuries. They had been watching, learning, preparing for this exact moment. "Sir," whispered his aide, "what are your orders?" Zektar stared at the screens showing 50,000 Confederation ships surrounded by an even larger human force. For the first time in his long military career, he was facing an enemy that was not only willing to fight, but was actually better prepared than he was. "Begin combat operations," he ordered grimly. "All ships, attack pattern Omega. We'll show these humans what the full power of the Confederation can do." What followed was not a battle, it was a slaughter. The humans had studied Confederation tactics for decades. They knew exactly how the Grand Fleet would deploy, exactly what weapons would be used, exactly how to counter every strategy in the Confederation military manual. Human ships moved through space like dancers, avoiding Confederation weapons while delivering devastating attacks of their own. The asteroid belt revealed itself as a massive network of interconnected weapon platforms. each one capable of destroying a Confederation dreadnought with a single shot. Most terrifying of all, the humans fought with the same suicidal courage they had shown before, but now they had the weapons and numbers to make that courage truly devastating. In 6 hours, the Grand Fleet was reduced to burning wreckage and fleeing survivors. As Zektar's own ship limped toward the edge of the system, he sent a final message to Confederation High Command. The survivors of the Grand Fleet limped back to Confederation space, carrying news that shattered 12,000 years of unquestioned dominance. The humans had not only defeated the largest military force in galactic history, they had destroyed it so completely that fewer than 3,000 ships escaped from the original 50,000. On Hegemony Prime, Supreme Chancellor Mordak stared at the battle recordings with something he had never experienced before: fear. The holographic displays showed human ships moving through space with impossible grace, weapons that ignored the laws of physics, and most disturbing of all, tactical coordination that suggested a level of preparation that should have been impossible. How long? He asked Admiral Zektar, who stood before the High Council looking like a broken man. How long have they been watching us? Zektar's voice was hollow as he replied, "Based on their technology and tactical knowledge, Supreme Chancellor, I believe the humans have been studying the Confederation for at least 100 standard years, possibly longer." The council chamber fell silent. The implications were staggering. While the Confederation had been conquering species after species, believing itself to be the supreme power in the galaxy, somewhere in the outer spiral arms, a young species had been watching, learning, and preparing for war. "But how?" demanded the representative from Zephyr. "Our scouts never detected any human vessels in Confederation space. Our intelligence networks never found any evidence of human espionage." It was the human response to this question that would haunt galactic civilization for generations to come. The answer arrived exactly 72 hours after the destruction of the Grand Fleet, in the form of a transmission broadcast on every communication frequency used by every species in Confederation space. The message reached every world, every ship, every outpost simultaneously, indicating a communication network more advanced than anything the Confederation possessed. Admiral Sarah Chen appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds, her weathered face calm and determined as she addressed the galaxy. "People of the Confederation," she began, speaking in perfect hegemony standard. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. I am speaking to you from the bridge of the battleship Humanity's Resolve, currently in orbit around your capital world of Hegemony Prime." Panic spread through the Confederation capital as citizens looked up to see a massive human warship hanging in their sky like a dark omen. The vessel was larger than anything humans were supposed to be capable of building, bristling with weapons that defied conventional understanding of physics. "Your leaders are probably wondering how this is possible," Chen continued. "They're wondering how a supposedly primitive species could defeat your Grand Fleet. They're wondering how long we've been preparing for this moment. Allow me to explain." The transmission shifted to show historical footage of early human space exploration, grainy images of primitive rockets and space stations. In the year 1977 of our calendar, humanity launched a simple probe called Voyager 1. Its mission was to explore our outer solar system. But as it traveled further from Earth than any human creation had gone before, it detected something unexpected: artificial radio signals from deep space. The footage changed to show human astronomers working frantically at radio telescopes, their faces filled with excitement and terror. Those signals told us we were not alone in the galaxy. More importantly, they told us that some of our neighbors were not friendly. "We intercepted communications from your military fleets. We listened to your conquest reports. We decoded your plans for expansion into our region of space." Supreme Chancellor Mordak felt his certainty crumbling as the human admiral continued. "What you call first contact happened 3 days ago. What we call first contact happened over 150 years ago. We've been watching you ever since." The transmission showed images that made Confederation intelligence officers across the galaxy question everything they thought they knew. Human vessels disguised as asteroids and space debris had been operating in Confederation space for decades. Human agents, using advanced biotechnology to alter their appearance, had been living among Confederation species, gathering intelligence and studying their weaknesses. Every species you conquered, we studied their defeat. Every weapon you used, we developed countermeasures. Every tactic you employed, we learned to counter. You thought you were building an empire. Actually, you were providing us with the greatest military education in galactic history. The recordings showed human shipyards hidden in the outer reaches, of their solar system, massive construction projects disguised as civilian mining operations. Generations of human scientists and engineers had devoted their entire lives to developing the weapons and defenses needed to resist Confederation conquest. You see, humans have a peculiar trait that you may not understand, Chen said with a slight smile. When someone threatens our families, we don't just get angry, we get prepared. The transmission shifted to show the hidden installations throughout the human solar system. Every asteroid had been hollowed out and converted into a weapon platform. Every moon had been turned into a fortress. Even the space between planets had been seeded with defensive systems invisible to Confederation sensors. We turned our entire solar system into a trap, Chen explained. A trap specifically designed to defeat your military doctrine. We knew exactly how you would attack because we'd watched you attack 47 other species. You never changed your tactics because you never needed to, until now. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. Your intelligence files classify humanity as a young species that achieved spaceflight only recently. That classification is incorrect. Humanity achieved interstellar travel capability 40 years ago. The reason you never detected our ships in deep space is because we didn't want you to. The footage showed sleek human vessels moving between star systems using technology that should not have existed. Faster-than-light drives that left no detectable signature. Cloaking systems that bent space-time itself to hide their presence. We have been mapping Confederation space for decades, Chen continued. We know the location of every world, every fleet, every installation. We know your supply lines, your communication networks, your military bases. Most importantly, we know your weaknesses. As if to prove her point, the transmission showed detailed intelligence files on every major Confederation world. Military installations that were supposed to be secret were laid out in perfect detail. Fleet movements that should have been classified were tracked with precision. But we are not conquerors, Chen said, her voice taking on a harder edge. We are defenders. We want nothing from you except to be left alone. However, if you threaten human space again, if you attack any human world, if you harm any human citizen, you will face consequences beyond your imagination. The transmission shifted to show images that made even hardened Confederation military officers feel sick with fear. Human war fleets, thousands of ships strong, positioned near major Confederation worlds. The vessels were cloaked and undetectable, but the humans were revealing them now as a demonstration. These fleets have been in position for 20 years, Chen explained calmly. They are armed with weapons that can destroy entire planets. They are crewed by humans who have trained their entire lives for one purpose, to protect humanity from alien aggression. Supreme Chancellor Mordak realized with growing horror that the Confederation was not just defeated, they were completely outmatched. The humans had been playing a game of military strategy for over a century, while the Confederation remained ignorant of their existence. To the people of the Confederation worlds, Chen continued, you are not our enemies. Your leaders chose to threaten us, but we bear no hatred for those who simply followed orders. Live your lives in peace. Pursue happiness and prosperity. We will not interfere with your affairs as long as you do not interfere with ours. The Admiral paused, her expression becoming grave. But to those who command the Confederation military, understand this clearly. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not negotiate with terrorists. Humanity does not forgive those who threaten our children. Your ultimatum has been rejected. Your fleets have been destroyed. Your empire will leave human space immediately and permanently. The transmission ended with a simple message that appeared in every language used by every Confederation species. Humans said no. In the months that followed, the Confederation quietly updated their star charts. The Sol system was marked with a new classification that roughly translated to interdicted zone, approach forbidden. Ships were rerouted to avoid human space entirely. The age of unquestioned Confederation expansion was over. But in the deepest corners of space, among the species that had been conquered and enslaved by the Confederation, word began to spread of something impossible. A species that had said no to the ultimatum and lived. Rebel movements that had been crushed for millennia began to stir again. Conquered worlds that had accepted their fate for centuries began to remember what freedom meant. And in the darkness between stars, human ships continued their silent watch, ready to defend not just Earth, but any world that chose to follow humanity's example. The galaxy would never be the same.